I was heading back from my 9 to 5 when I suddenly remembered that I actually had a YouTube channel. Yes, you're right. Since worshipping ancient deities for inspiration and creativity hasn't been working out, I decided to hit up my favorite streaming platform to see if I could find something to spark my imagination and give my channel a boost. While flipping through options, I stumbled upon a movie I'd heard about but never bothered to check out. That movie was Krampus from 2015, directed by Michael Daggerty. I was surprised to later discover how many films have been made about this topic. Krampus is a horror comedy that focuses on a dysfunctional family coming together for Christmas. However, when young Max gets fed up with the constant bickering and lack of holiday spirit in his family, he tears up his letter to Santa Claus, triggering the arrival of Krampus, a demonic entity from European folklore that punishes those who have lost faith in Christmas. As Krampus and his minions start terrorizing the family, they must band together and fight for their survival while discovering the true meaning of the holiday. Yeah, I know, it's not exactly groundbreaking in terms of plot, but introducing a folklore monster is always something that grabs my attention. So I decided to dig deeper into this beast. Google turned up tons of info and historical references about Krampus, including those medieval and later illustrations that I find so cool. In those illustrations, Krampus is depicted as a demon, part man, part goat, with a truly terrifying look. Don't get me wrong, the creature design in the 2015 film isn't bad at all. In fact, it's a solid representation of the antithetical side of Santa Claus, with that demonic old man look and a great showcase of modern practical effects. So guys, we've got a mission today. In this video, we're going to revamp the design of Krampus because the version from 2015 doesn't quite capture that beastly, animalistic vibe that the 19th century illustrations and earlier depictions had, but now it's starting to look a bit outdated, so it's time for a modern upgrade. Let's fire up Photoshop and get started. The plan is simple, to create a cooler and more terrifying version of the old Krampus. I was thinking of keeping those goat-like features from the early interpretations of the Christmas monster. A beastly head with goat ears, eyes, and large ram horns should do the trick. We'll keep the demon's signature long tongue, and to make it even more terrifying, we'll separate its lower jaw. I think I might need to see a therapist. For the body, I think a typical anthropomorphic demon form from the Baroque and Renaissance periods of European art will do the trick. Large, furry arms will hold a horse, because why not? To make it even more brutal. The hands will end in massive claws, while the legs will culminate in large, demonic hooves. Finally, to give it a Christmas twist, our Krampus won't be kidnapping children like in the original tales, but instead he'll be capturing Santa's elf helpers. A cage with thick bars will be perfect for imprisoning them. The chef's kiss will be a bunch of chains, hooks, and even demonic scarifications all over his body. Truly delightful. So here we are, using some stock images as references for more complicated elements like hooks, chains, and the anatomy of a horse. This is just the initial sketch phase, so the important thing here is to focus on the proportions and overall harmony of all the elements you want to include. We're not aiming for a polished line yet. I had a really great time drawing this Krampus. When I'm drawing, I usually try to imagine what elements would make sense if the creature we're creating were real. Since this monster is a true Christmas nightmare, I picture it as a frenzied beast that uses fishing gear, like hooks, chains, and small cages to capture its poor victims. I think the detail of holding the horse with one arm adds a truly terrifying scavenger-like touch, and conveys the message that Krampus is coming and will bring everything to an end. To add an even more exquisite touch to the narrative of our dear Krampus, I've considered that being the unstoppable beast that he is, he's likely had the occasional encounter with some locals who, oddly enough, might not be entirely charmed by his delightful manners. So why not add a few scars, elegantly embedded arrows, and even a subtly lodged sword in his back? Because, of course, nothing says Merry Christmas quite like a monster that looks like it's just returned from a medieval hunter's convention. Here I am shaping those Santa Claus helper elves with worried faces and their arms reaching out from the cage trying to, ask for help, I suppose. I also gave them the characteristic Christmas hats and long beards, which I now realize look more like the dwarves from the Lord of the Rings than the clean-shaven elves you find at shopping malls, but still, I think it looks pretty cool. As I'm wrapping up the line art phase, I moved on to drawing the legs of the beast. I won't lie, some of the more intricate details like the chains, the fur, and the scarification proved to be quite tricky to blend together in a harmonious way. Finding a balance between these elements without overwhelming the composition was challenging, but I think the final result is definitely worth the effort. Finally, let's focus on drawing our friend Horsey. For this, I turned to my mental library and recalled a painting that has always captivated me. That painting is Napoleon crossing the Alps, painted by Jacques-Louis David between 1801 and 1805. That horse's face has always fascinated me. It's a painting that doesn't aim to convey vulnerability at all. In fact, it seeks to elevate Napoleon's figure. Yet the animal's expression conveys a sense of anguish from traversing such genuinely difficult terrain. That expression in the eyes was something I wanted to replicate in my drawing as well, conveying the terror the horse must feel being captured by a demon. Finally, the folds in the muscles, along with the veins and the movement of the horse's tail and mane, will add a sense of dynamism to the drawing. At this stage, I'm adding the finishing touches, focusing on the wounds and scars present on both Krampus and the horse, enhancing the overall intensity of the scene. So, how has all of this turned out? Let's take a look. I think we've remained quite faithful to the concept we had in mind. It's worth noting that the design, with all its intricate details, might be hard to fully appreciate at first glance, but the different elements will stand out more clearly once the artwork is complete. So, what we have now is the perfect blank canvas to start adding shadows and bring our Krampus to life. Let's go for it. Shading is the longest part of my drawings. Seriously, sometimes it feels never-ending, but it's also what makes the drawing come to life. All thanks to the magic of values. Alright, let's talk values in digital art. No, not life values, but the kind that make your drawings pop. So what are they? Simply put, values are the different shades of light and dark in your artwork. Think of them as the backbone of your piece, even more important than color. Yeah, I said it. Imagine drawing without values. Everything would look flat and lifeless, like someone squashed it with a frying pan. But with values, suddenly your character has volume, depth, and shape. It goes from looking like a sticker to looking like it could walk off the screen, or at least shuffle awkwardly. Values are like the drama queens of your art. They create the mood, the atmosphere. Want something spooky? Crank up those dark shadows. Feeling cheerful? Keep things bright and light. They're the secret weapon for controlling light and shadow, which makes everything look more real and engaging. And hey, we cannot forget about contrast. It's like a neon sign for the eyes, literally screaming, "Look here." With high contrast, you can guide the viewer's attention exactly where you want it, right to the focal point of your piece. No contrast though. And it's like giving someone a puzzle, but hiding half the pieces under the couch. It's confusing, frustrating, and nobody's going to stick around to figure it out. So next time you're stuck in your drawing, and trust me, we all get stuck, don't stress about the colors like you're picking out a new wardrobe for a first date. Focus on your values. Nail those, and I guarantee your art will go from meh to wow faster than you can hit Ctrl-Z. So let's see how I create lights and shadows. I personally use three main tools: a soft brush with some texture, the smudge tool, and the selection tool, like the lasso. When it comes to the brush, what I typically use for shading is a soft brush with a bit of texture and a pretty low opacity. This allows me to work gradually over the area I want to shade, giving me room for error in case I darken the area too much. And here's a pro tip: it's super important that you don't shade with pure black. If you go straight to pure black, you'll lose the ability to color those shadows later. And trust me, that's something you really want when you're adding color to your piece. Now, the smudge tool, that's going to help you blend the lights and shadows together in a more organic and realistic way. It's like the glue that ties everything together. And lastly, the selection tools are essential for defining the areas you want to work on and creating those hard transitions in certain parts of the drawing, which helps separate different elements from one another. Okay, all of this is great, but let's set aside the technical stuff for a moment. Since we've got some time before this cute little time-lapse wraps up, let's dive into the story of today's main character. So, it seems like the origins of Krampus go way back deep into the icy Alps of Central Europe. I'm talking Austria, Germany, all the way to Slovenia. Krampus isn't just your average Christmas villain, he's rooted in ancient pagan traditions. And while we all think of Santa as the guy who gives out presents, Krampus? He was more about punishing. Okay, picture this. Long before Santa Claus was even a thing, people in those snowy mountain regions believed in spirits and creatures that roamed the forests during the winter. The season was brutal. and the cold, dark days symbolized more than just chilly weather. It was a time when evil spirits were thought to come out. And this is where Krampus steps in. His name actually comes from the old German word Krampen, which means claw, and trust me, the dude lived up to his name. Krampus was likely connected to Norse mythology too. He's believed to be the son of Hel, the goddess of the underworld. So Krampus was a kind of underworld enforcer. Imagine that, a demonic, horned creature stomping through the snow, not delivering gifts, but dragging misbehaving kids into the depths of the underworld. A bit more hardcore than coal in your stocking, huh? Now, over time, Krampus got a little makeover when Christianity started spreading through Europe. The church tried to get rid of all those pagan beliefs, but Krampus was too iconic to fully disappear. So instead of being erased, he was adapted. He became the evil counterpart to Saint Nicholas, our more familiar Santa Claus figure. And this is where things get really interesting. In medieval celebrations, Krampus and Saint Nicholas became this weird duo of Christmas yin and yang. While Saint Nicholas rewarded the good kids with treats, Krampus took care of the naughty ones. And I don't mean he just gave them a stern talking to. He'd beat them with birch sticks, throw them in a sack, and sometimes it was said that he'd drag them straight to hell. So yeah, Be Good for goodness sake had some serious consequences back then. As we move into the 19th century, Krampus really started to show up in popular culture, especially in places like Austria and Bavaria. In fact, there's this tradition called Krampusnacht, or Krampus Night, celebrated on December 5th, the night before St. Nicholas Day. On this night, people dressed up as Krampus, complete with horns, chains, and creepy masks, and paraded through the streets, scaring the living daylights out of everyone. Kids back then must have been on their best behavior. By the early 20th century, Krampus was showing up on postcards, which were known as Krampuskarten. These postcards were popular in Austria and Germany, and instead of jolly Christmas scenes, they showed Krampus doing what he did best, terrorizing kids. Some of these images were pretty brutal, showing Krampus shoving children into baskets or whipping them with sticks. But oddly enough, these cards were still sent around with holiday cheer, like Merry Christmas. Also, don't get kidnapped by Krampus. In modern times, Krampus has had a bit of a revival. People love his creepy, mischievous vibe, and thanks to movies, TV shows, and even video games, Krampus has become a global Christmas figure. There's even a resurgence of Krampusnacht in cities around the world where people dress up as this iconic monster and parade through the streets, scaring folks just like they did centuries ago. It's kind of like Halloween, but with more holiday spirit. Great, we've almost finished shading the drawing, even though it felt like an eternity. Now, I'm just going to wrap up the final details on the horse, like the expression in its eyes that we mentioned, a few veins, and a bit of saliva from the poor animal. So, how's it looking so far? Let's check it out. Okay, the shading turned out really nice and detailed, I think. I especially love how the shading on the horns and the beast's hair looks. I think the horse works well too, and I feel like we really captured the animal's anguish and horror in its eyes. On another note, you can really feel the tension in the horse's muscles and its overall dynamism. And even though it took forever to draw, the Santa Claus elves turned out pretty great. Finally, the legs, oh, I love these legs, turned out really well. The different folds in the demon's quads, along with the scars and chains, add a truly dark fantasy touch. But you know what? We are not finished yet. This is Rocky, a cute little shaded rock, but it's sad because it's lacking something, an extra bit of spice. It has the shape and the shading, but it can be taken further, and that's where textures come in. If we take some pictures of real textures and use blending modes, we can give Rocky some hyper-realistic details to make it juicier. And that's exactly what I did with our Krampus, using textures for that extra mile in terms of grittiness and realism. Some animal print textures were applied to the horse for a more unique look, while all the iron clutter received a nice and generous wrap of tasty, rusty textures. On the beast's horns, some cracks and fractures would give it a really cool ancient demon look, and at the same time, almost all of its skin has been covered with an aged leather texture to give the monster more character. And as a result, well, this. A super retextured drawing with tons of details. I especially like how the animal print on the horse and Krampus's legs turned out. And in general, the splashes of mud and blood on both the demon and the animal. Overall, a more raw and detailed version of what we had so far. And finally, we would add light and color to our Krampus. But since this is meant to be an entertainment video and coloring can get complex, quite complex actually, I'll make a future tutorial focusing solely on that aspect. Without much more to add, I leave you with the final redesigned version of the Christmas Demon. Guys, thank you so much for being here. It's been quite a journey. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you want. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see all of you in the next video.
Oh.